Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to the third of our four-part series we're doing with Tripad Grow. Yes, I can see with the webinar starting, and we're also being live streamed as well. That's amazing. Folks, really excited to be doing this webinar series because I think it's addressing an audience in the recruitment community that typically doesn't get a lot of love. We do a lot of VB stuff, a lot of recruiting stuff. It's usually big brands, big companies, people with big budgets and big TA teams. Yet the vast majority of recruitment activity being done today is typically done by a solo recruiter, first person in to an organization that's never hired a recruiter before. That was certainly my experience when I was doing the job as an operational recruiter. First person in, nothing there, you're on a spreadsheet, you've got to build it all from scratch. And we're going to try and address that audience, see whether we can give some input into how we can do that bit better. Because another condition of being a solo person in that space is that there's nothing really to knock your ideas around. Like no one else knows what to do. You are the one expert. So this is why we're doing this series with our friends at a Tripad. Tripad, by the way, just as a quick plug for them, they have actually produced an ATS variant called Tripad Grow, which is designed for this audience. So if you are still on a spreadsheet and you need to upgrade from that, which probably you should be doing if you're at 250 employees, you know, you're hiring more than 30 people a year or whatnot, you probably need to migrate off spreadsheets. In fact, with an eye on things like GDPR, probably you should never be on spreadsheets anyway. So you need something. Tripad Grow is a product that's customized for this space. So you might want to check this out. And I'm sure Jude will send you some links to check out a bit later. Okay, cool. Let's just do some sound checks as we always do. Want to make sure everyone can hear us okay. I believe this is a Zoom webinar, so we're all familiar with Zoom, I think. If you can hear or see me okay, do let me know in the chat. Just hover at the bottom of your screen there. There should be a nav bar which says chat. Go and say hello. Yes, thank you, Haley. It's great. Also a note, and this is one annoyance I have with Zoom, is that it defaults to chat to hosts and panelists. Please do make sure you post to everyone rather than a segmented audience. We want no elitism here. Everything that is spoken needs to be as public as possible. So default to everyone when you post something in chat. Okay, great. We also have polls, we have Q&A, we have all that kind of stuff. So obviously you know how to use all those tools. And by the way, hello everyone who is watching this on LinkedIn Live as well. We're getting into the Restream multicasting. It's an awesome tool. Hopefully more companies will get to use it. All right, let's get on with some intros. I'm going to go right to left on this as I see on my screen. So let's go with you first, Marian Jazak. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, thank you so much, Hung. I'm really excited to be here again. So I'm Marian. I'm actually based in Berlin, and I'm working now since, I think, more than 8 years in the employer brand space. And I was often, just the one-man show in a company and very limited or not even any budget. So I'm really excited to be here today and talk with you about this exciting topic.
Fantastic stuff, Marian. And we have Mike Suguru as well. Mike, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Thanks, Hung. So my name's Mike. I've been in recruitment for 10 years. So I've been on the consultancy side, but for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been predominantly working with charities, well, third sector and higher education. So I've moved from a very, very large charity to a much smaller charity now, where employer branding has been a big, big piece of what we're doing. So that's why I'm really keen to be part of the conversation today.
Super interesting. I think that charity sort of aspect, I mean, there's two angles there. Obviously, difficult on the employer branding side, and secondly, of clearly budget constraints as well. So this would be great to have your input on this, Mike. We have Christina Robinson, of course. Christina, wonderful to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, so I'm Christina from Green Umbrella Marketing. So I've spent the last, well, it's over 10 years now, talking about recruitment marketing from agency side, in-house side, talking about employer branding, candidate branding as well. So yeah, really, really looking forward to this conversation today.
Fantastic stuff. And finally, last but not least, it's the marvelous Claire Bush. Claire, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Well, today, thanks, Hung. Yeah, Claire Bush. I am a fractional CMO. I'm a non-exec director. I've worked in marketing for what feels like hundreds of years, but I also work like Christina across brands. So I spend my time mainly talking through activating employer brand and commercial brand to grow organizations. And I'm also co-founder of Career6, which is a SaaS platform, career sites, that helps to deliver that candidate experience as well for organizations of all sizes. So I'm very excited to sort of bring that into the mix as well today.
Fantastic stuff. And folks, if you obviously, I always want to promote connections. So if you want to connect to any of our guests on panelists on the show, make sure you do find them on LinkedIn and go ahead and pop them a connection request. Marian might say no, but everyone else is apparently going to say yes. So I joke, Marian. No, let's get on with this. Let's get on with this show, guys. Okay. You're a recruiter. You're in sort of first job in. The company brand is not there. We know this because the applicant flow is not there. The dropout rate is high. You can't close candidates. How do you go about sort of trying to sort of piece together some sort of EB plan when there's nobody else? I would imagine a lot of the business might not even know what employer branding is. So this is the context. Mike, let's go to you first. It seems that you might have some like live experience of this in recent days. So how did you broach this? Did you even talk about it, or do you think, you know what, they're not going to get it, I've got to do it on my own? Like what's the approach there?
Well, we're unfortunate that we've got a very collaborative organisation, but quite a lot of the skills and the tips that I picked up from previous organisations were quite easy to integrate. So I think for where I currently work, which is GamCare, which has been established for 25 years. So it's got a really big story to tell, but not a lot of people knew what the organisation actually was, including me. It was sold to me by a recruiter about the story and about where the organisation was going. So one of the key pieces for me was on our, not just our website, but on our job adverts, to actually say a snippet, this is who we are, this is what we do, a basic mission statement, but then picking out from an employer of choice perspective. For me, it was picking out the key benefits. So I always like to use the phrase low hanging fruit, but what's easiest to say? What have we got that we're just not actually telling people about? So making an attractive benefits package, making sure that's highly advertised. A lot of the work we do is remote or flexible. So actually shouting about that, because a lot of people are obviously looking for that. It's become a natural way of working. So highlighting it. So taking the really easy bits and just integrating it. But again, I've been very fortunate that our teams that we work with, we haven't got a lot of budget, but everyone's willing to just give something a try. And I think that's quite reflective of the third sector. If something doesn't work, you can change it. It's quite an easy thing to do, but try the low hanging fruit first.
Do you know what? I really like that initial observation. Like if you're going into a company, there's going to be features in there that maybe, because that's how the company is, it's not like that, you're not conscious of your own stuff, right? So, but remember that you're addressing an audience that as a candidate, I may not even know the brand. So you got to make sure that they're aware of that and highlight the things that you are doing. So absolutely, remember, one person in is likely to be a smaller company, smaller organization, smaller brand. Quite likely that the candidate population has never heard at all of your business. So you need to explain what that is. Give them a one-liner. Just don't think that they know, even though if everyone in the company knows, get it in there. And that one-liner, make it consistent in every job description, wherever the sort of the brand goes, that line goes with it. That's the classic tagline type of way. You know, we all know sort of the just do it from Nike and all that type of business. That's the sort of thing you got to channel. Have a look, audit your own brand. I mean, do you actually have a tagline? If you don't, have a think about it. Stick it in. That's easy. That's not something that costs money. So wonderful example there, Mike. Let's go to you, Claire. You're nodding sort of as Mike was telling that story. Do you find that that's quite a common thing, Claire, with regards to just, I guess, this level of brand consciousness of the brand itself? You might not be aware that you don't actually broadcast your own stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like that, see the trees, the wood for the trees kind of moment. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that sort of like, what's our vision, mission, purpose, and that statement. And you talked and you said it really nicely, Mike. It's that sort of, you know, kind of what you say on the tin about the company that you work for. I boil it down always to a boilerplate statement. So if you can articulate what the purpose of the business is, then that often is what the marketing team will be using as their sort of mental kind of, laser, if you like, to cut through and deliver the noise about products or services that they're offering. But also as well, I would just add, if you're going into an organization and you're thinking, okay, where do I start? Go make friends in your marketing team as quickly as possible and talk to the comms, talk to everybody, especially, this is one of my favorites, go and talk to the executive assistants or the people who really do all of the coordination and activity from, used to be receptionists, I'm much more sort of holistic now in terms of people who operate for multiple diaries or multiple execs. They hear and see and sort of feel, if you like, all aspects of that business. And so they are a really great source, not just of kind of friendship and helping you to navigate, but a really great source of content as well.
What's the, I've got some great comments that are supportive of that observation, Claire. But I wonder whether, like, what's the advice from a practical point of view for someone to approach that? Like, would you just message someone and say, hey, listen, can I learn? Like, how it feels like a bit of a cold approach. So there might be people in there that, not comfortable with it. What are the techniques? And I will invite Marianne and Christina and Mike to pop in with some thoughts on this. Like, you're a new employee. Do you have like a 2-week period where you're just charging in and meeting everyone? And if so, like, how do you actually structure that? What's the outreach message? How do you make sure they say yes to your meeting request, I guess?
I think for me, it's more about that whole, like, I want to learn and understand the business as quickly as possible. I do this a lot with my clients as well. It's that first 30-day kind of insight piece. You really do want to connect with as many people, and the importance of their roles, especially from a recruitment perspective, understanding how they navigate through the business and where their areas of expertise are, gives you that kind of real, I suppose, that hook to kind of say, look, I'd really love to learn from you. Any chance we can grab coffee, virtual coffee, a quick 15 minutes. And I really do suggest that first 2 weeks, fill your diary with as many conversations like that as you can. And then kind of regroup on a Friday or whenever on a midweek perspective. Do what I call a wash up. Get all of the salient points from the conversations that you've had and try and take that sort of objective view. You've still got fresh eyes. You can start to filter what I would call a little bit of a moan versus this is how it is. And so you can then really quickly learn to navigate what the sort of routes are to that information, to that vital content. And also as well, you're creating allies as you go as well. And they're the people that can kind of help you to spread the word when you need content to come back in for campaigns, or if you just really want to kind of help you want to help yourself by using them to spread the word as well and get those roles sort of aired a little bit more.
Yeah, so it seems like there's multiple reasons to do this. And it does feel as if it should be done like pretty much ASAP, doesn't it? Because if you're there, you can't just invoke this 5 months down the line, because they would expect you to be operationally productive at this point. So there's a period of grace when you come in, particularly as a new person. But that's the moment where you've got to do the big bang networking. Christina, I think you were definitely keen to say something. Would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, so I love what we're saying here, but I think there is a massive informal element to this as well, and I know it's difficult if you're working hybrid or work from home, but it is about just getting out there and going and hanging out with the cleaner in the cleaning cupboard and having that cup of coffee, or being in the smoking area or whatever it might be, and having those informal conversations. And that's something that should never stop. It should never, ever stop, because that is where we can identify the true values and the true culture. And I think this is the thing with employer branding. Sometimes we have this kind of loggerheads thing between EB and general marketing. And it's kind of like these are the values we want all of our customers to believe that we have, and this is the message we're putting out there. But actually, if we can get to the true values of the organization, that's what's going to pull the right people into the team. When we're able to communicate the true culture, that's when EB really comes next level. And I think there's a unique thing in here where you might have huge budgets. You can be running campaign after campaign after campaign. But if you don't do that baseline level, if you don't have that like nitty gritty, true understanding, doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, if we're not really looking at what the true culture is.
Yeah, so it's almost like, I think that's definitely true. Where there's criticism of EB is where it's like distant from reality, right? Like it's been invented by the CEO. It's very aspirational. That's what the leadership thinks the company is, but we know it's not believed by the business, because they'll still point to the hypocrisy of this situation, or some incident that's occurred that contravenes this value that they say is completely sacrosanct. So
I just want to cut in there, just because Valentina's just asked a question. I was just about to type an answer. But in organizations where there aren't marketing, or marketing's not actually arrived yet because it's fast scaling, and it is just the senior leadership team or a handful of people who have been driving that growth. And if you're turning up to help grow that business, but there is no marketing, there's no official or effective brand message, I've just suggested that actually you do need to sit down with that senior leadership team. You do need to interview them. You do need to ask of them what their vision and purpose is. But then I would be the gatekeeper of that brand message, replay that back to them once you've got all of the strands, and then become the person that takes the lead in delivering and developing that further out. So yeah, you kind of got a bigger job than just recruitment, because you become de facto brand guardian as well.
Yeah, basically you have to own it, don't you? And here's the thing, which I really like Victoria's question, because I think that you might often be an inexperienced recruiter into this environment, and just in terms of years in, and you might feel a little bit intimidated by C-level, particularly if they've been there for a long time. You've been brought in, maybe it's been quite a narrow brief. We need to hire 500 people. You got to do that. But in order to do that, you have to expand the role to do all of this EB stuff, strategy stuff, culture stuff, and you might just be struggling to build the confidence to do so. So Marianne, let's go to you on this. How does an experienced recruiter, or someone who's very young in their career, just got this job for the first time, how do they go about getting their own mental game right, so they can have a conversation with the CEO and say, actually, it's important we talk about values? How would you advise that person to approach that situation?
Yeah, I think it was mentioned already a lot that you need to, connect with the right people, do your research internally, kind of do your, brand discovery kind of. But I think what's really important if you go, to C-level or senior managers is really also to uncover, how they basically communicate in the organization and what's important to them. In my experience, especially like in, scale-ups, grown-up or tech companies, it's often, about like, numbers and what's in for us, what do we get out of that? So I think if you just go there and say, hey, I want to create a nice image of the organization, it's not enough. So you really need to do your discovery and have some numbers also before you approach these C-level or senior managers. But I think before you do that, it's really important what Claire or also Mike mentioned with, connecting with stakeholders, connecting with office managers, executive assistants. Plus also, I think I would focus first on all these low-hanging fruits, like Mike mentioned already, because I think an employer branding, or, if you're a recruiter who doesn't have so much experience in employer branding, it's not all about drafting like compelling values first or drafting an EVP, but really using harvesting all this low-hanging fruits. For example, Glassdoor or all these review pages, there's so much going on and you can do so much without even spending budget on this. And every candidate for sure will check your organization on these platforms. So I think these are things, which you can first get right before you're rising to the stars and approaching maybe senior management or C-level.
No, that's a really interesting corrective, Marianne. So yeah, you can't. This is a practical situation, right? Because you're a one-person organization. You may have limitations in terms of what you can actually achieve given that capacity. Getting some low-hanging fruit plus some early wins, those things can empower you to actually increase the impact of your role. So maybe if you can make some dramatic differences, I wonder whether, you know, some of them, here's where some measurements can help you, you know. For instance, if you believe that your applicant flow was low, then that's a measurable. You can measure how many applicants you typically get. If, for instance, are you measuring dropout rate? You can also measure before and after if you change some of the marketing elements. These are things that can help justify your case, and then incrementally you can expand your remit, so to say, that you can go and do some of this more longer term activities. Okay, so let's focus on some of the tactics in this case. Mike's already introduced one, which is really cool. Basically, what's the strapline? Let's make sure it's inserted into the job descriptions wherever the company is moving around. What else would you say is like, yeah, a lot of companies actually miss this one, but you should tick this off. Any thoughts on that? I'll throw this open to anybody that might have a bright idea here.
I think for me, just to jump in, the one thing that I found a lot of organizations don't have from a recruitment perspective, and a lot of my colleagues know this about me, is process and procedures and guidance. So with every template we have, I've got an extensive amount of guidance. So you can't handhold every single hiring manager through every single campaign, even though you'd love to. Time just doesn't allow for it. And find that some hiring managers or stakeholders just don't work that way. They want to be able to go to an online resource and go, right, now I need to do this, now I need to do this, or follow this flow. What do I need to change on the advert to make sure that it's legal, that it's got all the right information on, but making sure that that's in place. And I found that for me, whenever I join a new organization where that hasn't been done before, get that done first, because there's no point having to update it every 3 to 6 months and go, no, actually the advert is now ready for you to look at, the job profile is now ready for you to look at. Get your suite in place and guide people of where to go. So it's almost like answering FAQs automatically. I think, again, that's a really quick win. And if people aren't doing that, I'd suggest you do it really, really quickly.
Yeah, so this is like just documenting. I mean, the FAQ, documenting the FAQs itself might be a good description of what you're saying, isn't it? Because what are the common questions or issues that hiring managers have, if that's the stakeholder group you're trying to address? You know what, if you're just talking to them, responding every time they ask a question, that's going to be a massive bleed of your time. And of course, that's not scalable. So yes, you do want to put it down and into a document, kind of formalize it and say, look, this is the process which works the best, and here's the resource for you to use if you want to use it. It's almost like hiring manager enablement, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
And as you say, Mike, a lot of managers actually prefer that. You know, they don't want to necessarily interact with people in that context. Maybe they feel they don't want to bother you, or perhaps, you know, they think they can't control their time if they get involved in the call. So yeah, they want the resource and the ability to deploy something straight away. Really good input. Any other thoughts on quick tactics, quick wins? We're talking about low hanging fruits. Let's get all the cliches there. Stuff that, you know, somebody can do within the first couple of weeks, you know.
I think making sure all your inboxes, email addresses, and all those basic contact details are right, and also open, and also don't have any ridiculous errors or bounce backs, or go into the ether where you could just literally lose all of the work that you're potentially going to be doing following that. You know, you have to kind of almost do an audit of every single way in to the organization and check it, double check it.
That's a really good point. Like, how many legacy emails are hanging around? You know, some setting might be there on, I don't know, your Workday. It won't be Workday or whatever sort of tool you might have, but maybe that person's gone and no one's monitoring it and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely try and rationalize how applications flow in, so that it's not scattered across every other. It's like apply at, you know, acme.com or something, and that's a shared inbox that goes to where you determine it goes. rather than a hiring manager inbox. I think the most common thing actually, that if you're a first recruiter in 200 people, what will happen is those ads are going to random hiring managers inboxes. And of course, you have zero control over candidate experience, no visibility of what's going on. The hiring manager typically loses interest in the role after it's closed or filled, but that email might still be out there on various adverts or whatever, and there's like a bunch of candidates going into the email. So that needs to be rationalized. It's a really smart move. Some audit as to where it goes in, and you set a rule to say, folks, if we're going to put an advert out, this is the email we need to use for applications, and then that creates a consistent place. There's always someone monitoring that, and hiring managers, if they're into it, they can you pull them on and off based on the admin rights. Really good point. Any other tips that we can give, like just quick ones?
I think what Claire mentioned with this audit, about consistency and coherence, it's really smart. And I think, besides all these platforms where you probably advertise the jobs, I would include them basically. But I think what's also really important is to maybe have a look, over the shoulder of like recruiters or sources, how they basically pitch the organization. Because from my experience, it often happens that this is not even so consistent. And I think in employer brand, it's really important also to identify these brand messages later on, how you pitch an organization. It's like internally true, of course, and not different candidates get like different pitches, and some are then disappointed because it's not true in the end of the day. So I think it's maybe important also to look over the shoulders of recruiters or sourcers in the first weeks, how they actually currently pitch the organization.
Yeah, and I think that also applies to any stakeholder involved in the interviewing, doesn't it? Because hiring managers are obviously going to do those interviews. I'm going to say, are they on message? We're not like some sort of a police state here, but at the same time, there needs to be certain things that people understand, and maybe it's a training thing. You could train the managers as to what the key points are, like the values of that encourage people to join the company, and make sure that they're hit during that conversation they have with candidates. But then also make sure that certain things, that you don't want them to say, it's clear that they don't say it. Again, we're not like trying to obfuscate, but sometimes hiring managers might just say things that are politically incorrect, let's say, or whatever it might be, stuff that you can't really articulate into the marketplace. And that's loose talk can easily happen, when you have like let's say a culture where people are very, very familiar with each other internally, that kind of conversation can easily flow externally, and that is so important that the context is correct before that information is received. Okay, and if obviously from a candidate that's from the outside, they're not going to have that context, so it's important that we all understand that. Okay, any other thoughts on like immediate quick wins we can do on EB? We can really pick this low hanging fruit, get it kind of off the tree, so to speak.
I'd like to pick up on something that Mike was talking about. I think it's really important as well that just looking from an internal perspective, we identify the influencers and we turn them into advocates when it comes to EB. Because let's say we've got a couple of hundred people in that organization, we don't necessarily have to get them all on board in week 1, week 2. If we feel that level of responsibility, yes. However, if we can, who are the people that everyone listens to? Let's get them on board. Let's turn them into the success stories. It's like a domino effect. Others will follow. So I think it is in those first couple of weeks, really being able to identify those people that will then very easily help you take it the rest of the way.
Yeah, very, very good. And just recalling from my own experience, that happens. I ended up calling them recruiting assets, because there's certain people that were very, very good as recruiting assets, because they were influential internally. They cared about the people that were coming in, and they were actually quite good externally as well. And it was like, it's not related to role. These people might often be individuals whose function has got nothing to do with recruiting, but you got to surface them out. The big question to everyone here is, how do you find that out? Because obviously you can sit there, you can be an employee, you'll figure it out over time. But if we want to accelerate that and get to the crunch quickly, how do we actually know those people might be those assets? Any thoughts as how we surface those people up?
Yeah, for me, I mean, one, it sounds quite obvious, but looking at the hiring patterns, so as in what jobs are being recruited, because you find that some of the volume ones that I can say for our organisation, there's one hiring manager who's got a very high volume team, so he'll be the most frequent recruiter. So to make sure he knows what the processes are and what's needed, so what's required of him first, is always a good starting point. You'll have people, like I said, in the C-suite who might recruit once a year, once every couple of years. So again, more of the people who recruit the volume.
All right, really good point. Let's not forget that every hiring manager, the recruitment will have a larger or smaller part of their mind space based on their needs. And if you're managing a team that is growing, then obviously it's going to be a bigger component of your thinking. That person is likely to be an individual that needs your support more and can help you more. Whereas someone who's a very episodic recruiter, or maybe a very small team, or the team's totally settled, obviously they're going to be focusing on other things. So yeah, not all hiring managers are the same. Have a think about where the hiring volume is, and that will give you some guidance as to who needs to be spoken to there. Any other thoughts as to how we surface up these influences internally?
I would say, Claire mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, having all these informal conversations. And I think you can build in some questions there to uncover already, who is very active on social media, or who is like really in love with your company and would be a great brand ambassador. I think this is one point. And once I implemented a brand ambassador program in an organization I worked, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the first thing you would do, but I think when I launched it, I simply asked the organization who would be excited about this. And sometimes I think you're really surprised also from the tech side. So developers, product managers, they are, sometimes maybe you think in your employer branding bubble, or they are not excited about this. But there were so many people who were, excited about this and wanted to have a say and, really, be brand ambassador for the organization. So I think I would ask certain questions to uncover some, brand ambassadors early on, but then also just, have an open call probably to see who is excited about this. Because I think with that, you also can kind of measure or uncover the engagement in the organization. And maybe if, nobody signs up, then it's also like a sign that maybe something is not going right there. And yeah.
That's a really good point. Sorry, Hung.
Go ahead. Yeah, but just a quick one. An open call. Let's not be overly targeted to think, okay, this person's amazing, but you simply, it could be a survey, it could be a big shout out, just maybe an email circular. It could even be as simple as that. To say, hey, we're going to launch this program. What we want to do is to find people who really enjoy working in the organization. And we just want to, I don't know, record a 60-second video with you to get your day in a life, let's say, or try and get some understanding as to what's valuable to you working in this company. Would you be up for it? And again, you would be surprised as to who might volunteer into that. And those people might then emerge not only as producing good content for you, but they may also be very strong allies in the hiring effort for you. And as you say, it's not related to role or your perception as to, the personality types or whatever. You might be very, very surprised as to who might actually appear and step forward that way. Cool.
I was just going to add also as well, like within the organization, there's bound to be other groups that are meeting. There's bound to be other kind of cross-team meetings that happen. Piggyback off the meetings that are already in place, especially if there's sort of groups of 10 or more people, because you could always get in a little question right at the end of that meeting that you're involved in, just to kind of scoop up any sentiment and or plug the communications piece. I think Marian mentioned internal comms. I think this is also when you start pulling back the tin a little bit of the kind of worms that could be an employer brand, you end up finding that actually there really isn't that much of a structure around internal communications and employee engagement. is also then interlinked with that. And the sort of ecosystem that is comms, engagement, and brand need to operate together. So if you're that guardian, you're also going to need to help stir that pot and get that content to come to the surface, and attracting people to stand up in an organization where it may not have existed before might be a bit difficult to start with. But yeah, using some of the tactics that the team have already talked about, I think are really great to, yeah, ingratiate yourself, but then also as well warn people to helping you, because they're ultimately going to be helping themselves, the culture of the business to grow and thrive, and also for their potential growth. There's also that element of there could be future career prospects for them too.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be enthusiasts in any business. I mean, let's face it, you yourself have recently joined this company, right? So, you know, this is not so toxic that people don't join this business. So there's got to be good reasons why you did it. Okay, great. Therefore, there must be other people that feel likewise. Maybe it's a good thing to do to speak to, you know, the hires that have joined in the last year, you know, have an interview with them. And we all know that things like, you know, employee generated content is very powerful. Could you, for instance, do that conversation in a recorded video in some way? And that could be content that you could get out there to a wider audience. That seems to me to be very, very cheap to produce EB type stuff or marketing collateral you can use. Let's talk about this now. EB, we're talking a lot on, you know, early start, making relationships, getting all of those levers into place. Let's say, okay, we want to step it up now, and actually we're talking about how do we connect with the candidates. We want that more people interested in what we're doing, and we want to convert them in a more efficient way. What are the sort of things do we need to be doing in order for that to happen? To give you a bit of context, I was thinking, right, maybe one of the things you could try is, you know, you do a hiring manager does a to the camera justification, if you like, as to why they're hiring for the role. Like, explain to the audience why you're hiring for the position, Mr. or Mrs. Hiring Manager, and why should they want to join your team. And, you know, there's a 20-second video on that. So that could be something you produce real quick. Off it goes as a bit of marketing collateral to an audience that you want to hire. So something like that. I mean, any other ideas of that, of like type, you know, where, you know, no one's paying real money to do that you could kind of use to actually get more candidates through the pipe?
I like the idea of, if the hiring manager doesn't necessarily like video, and I hate video, so I'm quite glad that I'm on a webinar, because, you know, it's
a video.
But to produce video to camera, or even just to talk to my phone, I really hate it. But as an extrovert, everybody assumes that you should be able to do it. Sometimes it's really difficult to kind of put yourself out there. But however, taking photos of my work, or the, you know, the events that I'm at, or the people that I work with while they're working, then I can type something, then I can write something. So don't just limit yourself to asking people to do video, because actually that does actually close quite a few people off. But any kind of medium, you can always work with any kind of content. And so, yeah, just opening that out a little bit as well.
Yeah, so different content types. I mean, I suppose there's got to be a way to collect it. Has anyone got any like internal content management technique? I mean, this is where I'm ignorant here. Is it just like in an inbox somewhere? I mean, or is there tooling that can support the organization of this? If you're on
Microsoft, obviously there's the OneNote type thing, which is a bit like Notion. You've also got obviously the OneDrives, where you can put everything in and folderize everything. There's great ways in which you can do all of that through a shared Dropbox as well, if you've got a Dropbox subscription for your business. And then there's also a really great platform that I'm playing with at the moment called Clickify, where it is actually an employee engagement and an employer brand platform that's really cool right now.
Yeah, so probably tooling is in existence, but you don't have to over-egg it. You just need to create a shared resource And I was thinking here that wouldn't it be cool if you created that resource and then other people could make use of it? So you've vetted it because you can stick it in. But let's say you've got a library of hiring managers saying, hey, we're recruiting for this. Why not make that available for everyone in the business? Because it could well be that they're able to then retrieve that video and then send it on the happenstance where that's suitable. So the creation of these assets, I think, really helps. Okay, what are the techniques on sort of the outreach side, or you know, where we're doing contact with candidates? Do you think we could do something, you know, in a DIY sense that actually might work?
I think utilising your website, again, it's quite an easy one, but I found that with our recruitment page, it's very much, if you'd like to apply for a job, this is what you do. And it should be more than that. It should, again, be telling the story of why you want to apply and what should drive you there. So we broke ours down into sections. So we've got wellbeing sections, which, you know, is very on point at the moment, but we've got a benefit, which is the Calm app, which every employee gets. So actually saying, look, you get this, it's really, really good. So making sure that anyone external, when they go on, we've got a nice system of drop-down boxes. So depending on what you want to look at, whether it's family leave or whatever it might be, it's really accessible, but it doesn't look like one page of text. It's broken down quite nicely.
You've just sort of given me, reminded me of some really, really cool examples of companies that have used their own recruitment process as an EB type of tool. So I think, Marian, I think you know this company Blinkist in Berlin do this really well, where they have a pro-candidate sort of value on their career side. So they just want you to succeed, and they'll tell you, here's how you actually get through sort of our assessment, and they'll just very public what their assessment is and say, it's this stage, this stage, this stage, here's what we're looking for, this is the sort of prep material you want, and all this type of stuff. And it's just up there. Now, what's interesting here is that's probably just internal documentation that most companies have, but it's always locked away as an internal for your eyes only type of content. They've externalized it, put it onto the website, and everyone is thinking, whoa, that's really haven't seen this level of transparency before. Trust level goes up because suddenly the candidate isn't going through this black hole experience. They're aware as to what their demands are, and actually there's material on the page to tell me how I'm meant to prepare for this. So I thought that was a really smart way to get to the process exposed, but also as an EB push as well, to make it very, very clear how this looks. And you don't necessarily need to go to their degree. Simple publication of your recruitment process would be fine. But again, a missing component from most websites. It would be interesting actually if anyone's done an audit on this. You know, the 100 career web pages or employer sites, how many of them have actually exposed what the recruiting process is in a way that's understandable for candidates? I think that's probably quite a low percentage. Okay, any other thoughts, folks, on how we could kind of get the EB in front of these candidates in such a way that will kind of improve the quality and the quantity of the applicants?
I mean, I always go straight to a social media, you know, presence and activity there. But I think it's really important, and it ties in with what we're saying, to know the story right from the very beginning of that candidate first entering the funnel, all the way through to them being enrolled 2 years, 5 years, what that development plan looks like, knowing that story from beginning to end, and be able to have the awareness and look for the opportunities to actually, you know, that person's experience there fits in with this part of the story we're trying to tell. And yes, it goes on the website, but it's actually going out on our social media channels as well, and looking for those opportunities where perhaps we can do a bit more to boost those specific posts, because they're going to align that individual telling that story as part of that team that we've got a real recruitment push on right now, and being able to position things in that way. And it might be through written content, an audio piece, a video. You know, the thing about video is nobody likes a phone being stuck in their face saying record a video now. But if they can share the hot seats, coming on to Zoom and doing an interview here, StreamYard, Restream, whatever it might be, there's lots of different ways of creating this content where people don't just feel like they've, you know, the spotlight's on them. So it's about how we position things in order to be able to get this content in the first place. And
yeah, On that note, you're absolutely right. If you're just sending an email to hiring managers or employees, record a video and send it in, that's going to have very low conversion no matter what the situation is. You share the space, you take the lead on it. Much easier for someone to just jump on a VC like this. You just say, hey, we're going to record it. And the other person doesn't have to do a lot of work. They just have to respond to a prompt or a question that you ask. That question could be, hey, could you name one thing that you really like working in company X or organization Y? You do 10 of those and you might have a little collage that might be quite cool. A very low effort. Folks, it's now 1:45, so we're rapidly moving towards the end of this show. For the people who are with us, if you have any questions for our panelists on this topic, please make use of the Q&A feature. Go and ask your questions in there. I know you're on chat as well, but easier for us to actually retrieve those questions at Q&A. So put them in there and we'll get to them in 5 minutes as we move to the end of this this session. Okay. Let's talk about, we talk about one good thing that working in that organization might be. What's the one sort of recommendation you would give to a recruiter that's joining an organization for the first time, first recruiter in? How do you do EB on a budget? Any tips that this person could practically use? So we're talking again, do it today type tips so that they can go ahead and tomorrow they'll get an uptick in terms of their applicant rate or whatnot. Let's any thoughts on this? I mean, I could just go around. So Marianne, you look as if you're totally prepared to answer this question.
No, I was just thinking, because I think what my number one tip would be, really before really running into execution, really do a brand discovery, and as Claire also mentioned initially, connect with the people, because I think employer branding is also a lot about like educating, stakeholder what it is, and get the buy-in from different stakeholders and get them excited about this. Because if they are not excited about this, you will be like a one man or one woman show, and nothing probably will work. So I think it's really important to do your proper brand discovery and connect with the right stakeholders, or get the right people on the bus, so you have a team in the end of the day, like an informal team with whom you can run and do really great employer branding. I think this would be my number one advice, because I think I have made this mistake myself in the past, that I was so pushed for delivery and really run for execution without doing a proper maybe discovery or education of the stakeholders. So I think I would always recommend that.
Yeah, very good point. And folks, you're not going to carry everyone with you, right? I mean, let's set the right expectations in the right place. There's always going to be detractors. There's always going to be people that are literally malcontents. In every business, there's going to be people that are just bar humbug everything, and that's fine. That's just who they are. Part of the rich tapestry of life, so to say. But there are going to be individuals that are going to be really into the vision of trying to do something and selling the story of the company that they're proud to work for. Let's identify who those are. You can create almost like a resource group or some sort of group along the side, a WhatsApp group or whatnot, and that may be a little team that you can go ahead and collaborate with and start pushing a few of these initiatives through. And once a few of these things start get externalized, that's when other people who may be a little bit more reticent or a little bit more reluctant can start popping their heads up and thinking, oh, that actually wasn't so bad, or that was actually quite cool. And then the momentum will start shifting from there. Cool. How about you, Claire? Any actionable sort of stuff that people can do?
Well, Hans just asked a question in the thing, and I just kind of went, oh, yeah, no. He asked, what are the common pitfalls? And one of the common pitfalls is that you walk in there and kind of go, right, so tell me about the employer brand. What does this business stand for? What is the reason why people want to join? And nobody understands what you're talking about, because employer brand matters to nobody else other than you. So I think about your language, think about the role and the purpose that you're there to fulfill, and what you assume your job to be. Someone else might assume it to be very different. So make sure you're on that same page before you go down the track of investigating or finding out anything else. And then the other thing that I thought of as well was just being ready to kind of go. I often fly by the seat of my pants. Most people who've worked with me know that I'm kind of like a million miles an hour with my hair on fire, and laying the road as we go is okay. You don't need to have all of the T's crossed and the I's dotted to kind of make that impact. So go as quickly as you can, but bring everybody with you and make sure everybody is aligned and understands why you're putting so much purpose on the elements that you're putting purpose on.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We can overplan, can't we? We can spend way too much time doing the research and stuff like this, and there's no externalization. Let's not forget that these questions probably occur most prominently at the early part of your entry into the company, and there is a need for you to be the one making a bit of momentum and having that early sort of externalization is what I call it. So get it out of your head and get it into some situation where it's actually connecting with the market. Okay. How about you, Christina? Any thoughts? Any recommendations for this? I've got this vision of this young milksop of a recruiter going into this first internal recruiter job. What sort of advice would you give them for being on a budget?
So I think figure out the story, find the evidence that supports it, and get it out there. And you need to do that internally and then externally as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that juggling act is one of the toughest ones, isn't it? Or maybe it isn't even a juggling act. Perhaps it's just a kind of an artificial a wall that we've put in our own minds as to what is internal comms and external comms. But as we know more about how people like to consume information, people like to sort of see the reality, the authenticity of what goes in. So perhaps that barrier is starting to fade, and it's about sort of opening out and having people get an access into what it is you're doing. Okay, Mike, let's leave the final word to you. You're probably the one that's kind of most sensitive to all of this, because this is your lived reality today. So what sort of tips and advice could you give, let's say, to another Mike in a different context, as starting tomorrow in the new job?
Yeah, I think, as you said, if you're first one in, I think go back to basic recruitment methodology. Which again, always sounds really obvious, but look at the adverts first. It's something that I do in every organisation that I've worked at. If you're the first one in, the person who's written the adverts before won't necessarily have a recruitment background. So I think it's quite easy to assume that what's already in place works, where most of the time it works fine, but it can work a lot better. So as Christina said, find your story, work on your story. Stop writing adverts like a job description, write them with your story, write them with your hooks, get back into the sales process. I think that can be said for anyone going into any organization. Start from the very basics, just rework everything, revise everything. As I said before, I think once you get 6 months down the line, it's very hard to then go back and then retrain everyone, or then to review, because you've already moved on to new things by then.
That's a really good point. Let's not forget, when I say this is we're starting from zero, it's not quite true, because this organization is already 250, however many people it is. There has been 200 people already recruited for this company. Therefore, there's lots of legacy in there, processes, documentation, copy, material assets, whatever it might be. All of that is material you can start working with. And then so a lot of it you might be able to keep rolling with, but I suspect it's a great deal that you could readily improve and get an extra 10, 15, 20% of value out of it simply by repurposing some of the existing material. So fantastic stuff. Okay, folks, I think we are coming to the end of the show. Thank you so much for all of your time. I hope you've enjoyed it. There are questions, but I think Claire's answered them all. So I don't think there's if you want to actually review them, you can actually still do this. Actually, you can't. No, you can. I think everyone can still access that. So go ahead and do that if you want to review them. But make sure you connect with everyone who's sort of part of this show, everybody. If you want to continue the conversation, I'm sure our panelists are more than happy to have dialogue with you after the fact. And yeah, we're gonna close it off here. We have a final episode to go. We have one more episode from this series with Tripad. Again, our focus is going to be with recruiters who are coming in, maybe as the one person in this small organization. We're going to be talking about stakeholder management, so related to this, but how do you actually create the relationships with your stakeholders such that you can do your job? If you end up having an adversarial relationship with stakeholders, guess what? You got no chance. It's the first thing you've got to get right. So how do you do that? Particularly if you're young or you're early in your career, you're not used to this, it's first internal job, let's say something like this. Your confidence may not be there at this moment. What are the tips that we can go and help you improve? So we'll have another wonderful panel that's going to help us with that conversation. Jude is going to send you the registration link for that. I think that's already set for November at some point. So make sure you register for that. Other than that, thank you all for watching, folks. It's been great having you. Thank you, Marian Jarzak, Mike Sugrue, Christina Robinson, and Claire Bush. Wonderful to have you on the panel, guys. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.